The sun did not rise so much as it bruised the horizon. A smear of sick orange bled through the permanent brown haze that choked the city, backlighting Milo's silhouette against the dawn. He stood on the flat tar roof of the firehouse, the chill of the morning seeping through the thin fabric of his Henley. It was a familiar cold. It lived in his bones now, a phantom weight that settled in his chest whenever the world was quiet. The weight of Dave. Footsteps, soft and deliberate on the gravel, announced her. Anya stopped beside him, her long, dark hair pulled back in a severe, functional braid. She followed his gaze toward the distant, hulking shape of the stadium, a concrete promise of fortification that felt a world away. "The last of the coffee is gone," she said. Her voice was level, a statement of fact, not a complaint. Milo grunted, a sound lost in the faint, ever-present groan of the city. He could feel her watching him, her analytical gaze taking in the hollows of his cheeks, the dark circles gouged beneath his eyes. "We have maybe 4 days of canned goods. 3, if we're being honest with ourselves." She pulled the satchel slung across her chest a little tighter, a subconscious gesture, like she was holding on to the last bit of order in the world. "We can't wait for it to run out, Milo." He knew she was right. Every day the patrols went out a little farther and came back with a little less. The firehouse, once a sanctuary, was becoming a tomb. He finally turned from the horizon to look at her. "I know." A whistle cut through the morning air. It was sharp, high, and urgent. 2 short blasts, the perimeter signal. They moved without speaking, a practiced and economical descent down the iron ladder and into the sleeping quarters. Corbin was already on his feet, his tactical vest buckled over a stained button-down shirt. He was pulling a compact crowbar from his belt loop as a young survivor. Leo scrambled from his cot, all gangly limbs and wide, fearful eyes. "Ground floor," Corbin snapped, his voice a low rasp. "They're in the yard." The cavernous bay of the ground floor was a maze of scavenged barricades and dusty equipment. The air smelled of soot and decay. Milo went to his old locker, the red paint chipped and peeling. He pulled out his go bag, the weight of it familiar in his hands. He slung it over his shoulder, but then he paused. He reached back inside, his fingers finding the cool, smooth cylinder of a worn map tube. "What's that?" Anya was beside him, her own pack already secure. Milo's fingers tightened on the tube. "My city," he said, his voice low. "The way it's supposed to be." A sharp crack, followed by a choked scream, shattered the moment. Leo. He had been moving to reinforce a window near the main stairwell, his feet finding a rotten section of the floor. One of his legs had plunged through the splintered wood. Below, in the darkness of the basement, pale hands clawed at his trapped limb, their fingers scrabbling for purchase on his jeans. Corbin was there in an instant, his face a mask of cold logic. "Leave him." Milo stared. "What?" "He's a liability. The noise will draw more. We cut him loose and seal the basement. It's the only move." The world compressed to the smell of accelerant and cooked plastic. Milo saw a face lit by unnatural orange light, a mouth open in a shout that was swallowed by a deafening roar. Dave's face. He could feel the heat on his own skin, the ragged burn scar on his forearm, a phantom echo of the pain. "No." The word was quiet, but absolute. No one gets left behind. He snatched a Halligan bar from its wall mount. The forked steel felt solid in his grip. "Anya, the hose reel." Ignoring Corbin's string of curses, they worked. Milo jammed the fork of the Halligan into the floorboards next to Leo's leg, using the tool for leverage, prying the rotten wood apart. The snapping and groaning of the floor was terrifyingly loud. Anya wrestled a section of old canvas fire hose free, looping it under the boy's arms. Leo was sobbing, his cries turning into thin, ragged squeals of terror as the dead below tore at his boot. "Pull!" Milo shouted. He put his back into the Halligan, straining until the muscles in his shoulders screamed. Anya and a now silent Corbin hauled on the hose. With a final, sickening splintering of wood, Leo came free. They dragged him back, his leg bloody but whole. The rescue was loud, messy, and successful. A moment of ragged breathing, of shared relief. Then a new sound began. It was not the isolated groans of a few stragglers. It was a low, rolling moan that grew in volume, a single terrible voice made of 1,000 throats. Milo moved to the grime-coated window of the main bay door and peered through a crack in the barricade. His stomach dropped. The street was gone. In its place was a slow, shuffling river of bodies. A section of a migrating horde, drawn by the sound of the rescue, now flowed past their door, an endless tide of decay. A heavy, rhythmic pounding started on the reinforced bay doors. Then another, and another. The entire front of the building began to shudder with the impacts. They were trapped. Milo. Anya's voice cut through the noise. She was standing by a massive, yellowed city grid map on the wall, her finger tracing a faint, dotted line. The plan scrubbed. But there's another way. Down. Her finger rested on a small icon beneath the firehouse footprint. Subway access. Corbin stared at her, then at the thundering doors. Through the basement? With them? It's the only way out that isn't that street, she countered, her voice tight. The choice hung in the dusty air. The known overwhelming danger pounding at their front door, or the absolute unknown in the darkness below. Milo looked at Leo, trembling on the floor. He looked at the bay doors, bowing slightly with each impact. He remembered the fire. He had failed to save one. He would not fail them all. We go down. He moved to the heavy steel door that led to the basement, grabbing the rusted wheel handle. He put his weight into it, turning it with a screech of protesting metal. He wrenched the door open. A steep iron staircase descended into pitch blackness. A gust of foul, stagnant air, thick with the smell of mold and things long dead, rushed up to meet them. And from the darkness below, a sound rose. It was distinct. Not a groan. It was a wet, rhythmic e-scraping. The air changed first. It went from the thin, dust-choked breath of the street to something thick and ancient, a subterranean exhalation of cold stone and decay. Milo clicked on his flashlight, the beam a solid white spear that pierced the throat of the subway entrance. It painted a circle on the far wall, illuminating a mosaic of cracked tiles and a century of grime. He took the lead, the worn grip of the light a familiar weight in his hand. Behind him, Anya's boots scraped on the concrete steps, the sound too loud in the sudden quiet. The metallic scraping that had drawn them down here was louder now, a rhythmic shriek and drag that echoed from the tunnel's depths. There, Milo said, his voice a low command. He swept the beam to the right. A massive ventilation fan, its grillwork rusted into a lattice of orange lace, sat silent in its housing. One of the blades, bent and sheared, hung loose. It swayed in the faint draft from the street, its jagged edge scoring a long, weeping scratch in the metal casing. Drag, shriek, drag. A simple, mechanical ghost. Station blueprints show the main platform access is 50 yards in. Anya's voice came from behind his shoulder. She held her own light, its beam aimed down at the sheaf of rolled papers in her hand. Should be a straight shot. He grunted, moving forward. The platform was a tomb. Decayed posters for movies that never premiered peeled from the walls. A scattering of discarded luggage lay where it had been dropped, fuzzy with a pale green mold. Every drip of water from the vaulted ceiling hit the ground with the force of a hammer blow. He moved with a practiced economy, his light sweeping from corner to corner, an extension of his will. He was a rescuer. This was just another confined space. He could control this. A low rumble, deep in the earth, vibrated through the soles of his boots. It grew into a grinding roar. Dust rained down from the ceiling, back. He grabbed Anya's arm, pulling her against the wall as a section of the tunnel ahead of them collapsed inward. A cloud of concrete dust and darkness billowed toward them, and the way forward was gone, replaced by a mountain of rubble and twisted rebar. The air was chalk. Anya coughed, pressing a sleeve to her mouth. Her light darted across the blueprints, frantic. Here, a service corridor. It should bypass this section. She pointed to a low steel door marked with a faded yellow triangle. Corbin was already there, prying at the rusted handle. It gave with a groan of tortured metal. The air that washed out was foul, a wet, organic stench that made Milo's stomach clench. The corridor was narrow, barely wide enough for them to pass in single file, and it was flooded. Dark, oily water filled the passage, its surface unnervingly still. No choice, Corbin stated, not asking. He stepped in without hesitation. The water swallowed his legs to the thigh. Milo followed, the icy shock of it stealing his breath. Grime clung to his station pants. He held his light high. The water rose as they moved deeper, sloshing against his ribs. It was opaque. He could not see what his boots were kicking, what unseen things brushed against his legs. Maria, a survivor they had picked up near the library, whimpered behind him. The sound was swallowed by the oppressive quiet. Each step was a gamble, a prayer that the floor was still there. A sudden, violent splash shattered the silence. Maria screamed, a raw, piercing sound of pure agony. Milo spun around, the beam of his light finding her. She was thrashing, her face a mask of terror. Her hands clawed at her leg, at the dark water that churned around her. Something had her. Something was pulling her down. He lunged back, his rescuer's mind blanking out everything but the victim. He grabbed Maria under the arms and heaved. The resistance was immense, a dead, sucking weight. He planted his feet and pulled, muscles screaming, the foul water sloshing into his mouth. She came free with a slick, tearing sound. He dragged her to a less flooded section of the corridor, her body limp. He laid her against the slimy wall, his light fixing on her leg. The denim of her jeans was shredded below the knee. Beneath it was a ragged, semicircular wound, a crater of flesh and splintered bone. It was not a cut. It was a bite. No, 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 he muttered, his mind screaming. He tore a strip of fabric from his own shirt, his fingers clumsy, shaking. He had to stop the bleeding. He had to put pressure on it. A tourniquet. He fumbled with the makeshift bandage, his motions frantic, desperate. He wrapped it above the wound, pulling it tight, trying to remember procedures that felt 1,000,000 years old. He could fix this. He had to fix this. The smell of hot smoke filled his nostrils. The wind on the 20th floor was a hollow thing, a sound with no source. It moved through the skeletal structure of the unfinished condominium, carrying the smell of old concrete and the fine, gritty dust that now coated Milo's skin and clothes. The floor-to-ceiling window frames were empty sockets staring out at the city, staring at the I-78 overpass. It was not a bridge. It was a river of the dead, a sluggish, 5-lane-wide current of bodies flowing nowhere. From this height, they lost their human shape, becoming a single, sprawling organism. A carpet of rot that undulated with a silent, collective purpose. Hope was a fragile thing, and the sight of that bridge broke it. Anya knelt on the dusty floor, her blueprint spread out like a battle plan for a war already lost. The cardboard tube that held them lay beside her, a holy relic for a dead faith. The Morrison is down. The old rail bridge, too. Her voice was flat, each word a discarded. Possibility. Demolished, according to the city plans. Corbin stood by the empty window frame, his arms crossed over his neat tactical vest. He made a sound of disgust in the back of his throat. So we go north. Find a different crossing. And add 50 miles of city. We don't have the fuel. Or the food. Anya traced a line on the map with a finger that left a clean trail through the grime. This was the only way. Then we find another way. Corbin's gaze was fixed on Milo. Unless you're out of ideas, Fireman. The title was a barb. Milo ignored it. His attention was on the overpass, on the thousands of bodies packed shoulder to shoulder. He did not see people, not anymore. He saw fuel load. He saw Class A combustibles, densely packed. He saw a problem of fire dynamics. The thought was a cold slick of oil in his gut. He knelt, unstrapping the map tube from his own pack. He pulled out the worn, creased document and unrolled it. A fire department pre-plan. It was full of hydrant locations, standpipe connections, and warnings about hazardous materials. He laid it over Anya's pristine blueprint. The two worlds collided. The city as it was meant to be, and the city as it could burn. His finger moved, tracing a line from a blocky building labeled Riverfront Chemical Plants. It moved through a dense grid of red-marked brick structures, the old warehouse district. It ended at the foot of the overpass. The main storage is here. His voice was a whisper, a secret he was telling himself. but hazmat protocol requires a smaller, isolated reserve depot a few blocks away for spill containment chems. Here's. His finger tapped a small, square building. The pieces clicked into place, not with a feeling of triumph, but with a cold, sickening finality. He looked at the massive bodies on the bridge, then back at the map. A conflagration. Anya looked up, her brow furrowed. A what? A fire so large it creates its own wind. Its own weather system. He felt the words leave his mouth, detached from the man who used to put fires out. A firestorm. We burn them off the bridge. Burn it all. Anya stared at him, her face a mask of disbelief. Her mouth opened, then closed. You'd burn the city to save us? The shock in her voice was sharp. Then, just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by the calculating look he knew so well. Her planner's mind had engaged, unable to resist the terrible logic of the problem. Her eyes darted to the map. It wouldn't work. The prevailing wind is from the west. It'll blow back on us, on the plant. But the map shows a natural gas substation here, he pointed. If we rupture a line, we can shape the initial blast cone, push the front east, toward the river, before the prevailing wind takes over. Corvin pushed off the wall and came to look over their shoulders. He stared at the two maps, at Milo's finger, at the horrifying path it drew. A slow smile spread across his face. It was a rare, unsettling sight. It's insane, he said, the words full of a newfound respect. It's perfect. Dusk bled the color from the city, leaving behind long, distorted shadows that turned alleys into mouths. They moved in silence, the only sounds the scuff of their boots on broken pavement and the low, constant moan of the distant horde. The air grew cooler, carrying the scent of decay. Milo's Halligan bar was a heavy, familiar weight in his hand. The plan was a tumor in his mind, growing with every step they took toward the chemical plant. This was not saving. This was erasure. As they rounded a corner, a flicker of movement caught his eye. A shattered storefront, the words Parmeses still visible in faded green letters. Inside, behind a toppled rack of shelves, were people. The flashlight beam coughed, a weak yellow spasm that painted the alley in fractured moments. A snarling face, teeth ground to points. A grasping hand, skin split over bone. The wet scrape of a foot dragging on greasy cobblestone. The beam died and left them in absolute darkness, the sounds now impossibly close. Milo's breath hitched. He pressed his back against the brick wall, the rough surface a poor comfort. Anya was a tense shape beside him, her hand gripping the strap of her satchel. The smell of decay was a physical thing, a film on his tongue. Another flicker. The light held for a second, catching the front rank of them, no more than 10 feet away. Their dead eyes were voids in faces slick with grime. The stuttering light, the heatless orange glow of their own rot, the suffocating press of the air. It was the warehouse all over again. The memory hit him not as a thought, but as a physical blow. The roar of the fire, a living beast sucking the air from his lungs. Smoke, thick and black, churning like a storm cloud under the steel rafters. He saw Dave, a silhouette against a wall of orange, his face hidden by his mask, but Milo knew his expression. He knew the set of his jaw. Dave had turned, just for a second, and his voice had cut through the din. Not a scream for help, but an order, a lesson. Backdraft. Choke the flow path, Milo. The memory had always ended there. It had always been the moment of his failure, the point where he froze, where Dave was consumed. Guilt was a furnace he had lived in for years, but now, pinned in the dark, the words echoed differently. Choke the flow path. Not fight it, not meet force with force, starve it, control its hunger. The flashlight flickered one last time and died for good. The guttural moans of the dead filled the sudden, perfect black. A profound stillness settled over Milo. The frantic energy in his chest did not just vanish. It crystallized into something cold and hard. Guilt had made him remember the failure. It had blinded him to the lesson. He wasn't meant to save this chaotic world. He was meant to command its chaos. He felt Anya shift beside him. He turned his head, though he could see nothing but the faint outline of her hair against the slightly less black sky above the alley. He would not atone for the fire that took his friend. He would become the fire to save his future. A shape detached itself from the shadows at the far end of the alley. Corbin, moving with crisp, tactical purpose toward the main gate of the chemical plant, heading for the main tanks. Milo watched him for a beat, his mind a grid of pipes and pressures, of fuel loads and flow paths. He knew this city's guts better than anyone. He leaned close to Anya, his lips near her ear. His voice was not the ragged whisper of a terrified man. It was the calm, low tone of a captain issuing a field order. He thinks he's the only one willing to burn it all down. He pointed into the deeper shadows to their left, where a lattice of pipes ran up the brick wall. He doesn't know the city like I do. See that regulator station? She nodded, a small, jerky movement. We're going to give them something else to look at. They moved along the wall, a single organism of desperate purpose. Anya pulled their last flare from her pack. Milo found the valve wheel on the gas line. It was stiff with rust. He put his shoulder into it, the metal groaning in protest. A hiss started, a snake in the dark, growing louder, the air thickening with the smell of mercaptan. Now, he said. Anya tore the cap from the flare. The scrape of the striker was a gunshot in the tight space. A furious red light bloomed, throwing their shadows, long and monstrous, against the wall. The faces of the dead turned toward the light, their expressions slack with primal instinct. Anya tossed a flare underhand. It skittered across the ground and came to rest beneath the hissing pipe. For a second, nothing happened. Then the world became a white roar. A jet of flame erupted sideways from the regulator, a horizontal pillar of fire that lit the alley with the light of a false sun. The pressure wave slammed them against the brick. The dead closest to the blast were vaporized or thrown like dolls. The others, the entire writhing mass, stopped. They turned as one entity toward the continuous, screaming plume of fire, toward the chemical plant, toward Corbin. From the roof of a nearby tenement, they watched him die. They saw his small, efficient figure realize his mistake. He had been moving toward his prize when the roar began. Now the prize was coming for him. The tide of bodies that had been trickling through the city's veins became a flood, all of it surging toward the roaring beacon of flame. Corbin was swarmed, a single rock submerged in a relentless, unstoppable river. Milo felt nothing. He was already planning the next step. Corbin had overlooked the secondary depot, a low concrete bunker a quarter-mile away. They secured the drums of accelerant with a detached efficiency. There was no more hesitation. The water tower was a skeleton of rust against the bruised twilight sky. From the top, the city was a schematic of their problem. The I-78 overpass was a solid, moving carpet of the dead, a river of undeath flowing toward the heart of their quarantine zone. This was their altar. Milo worked with the precision of a man dismantling a bomb, except he was building one. He unspooled the det cord, his movements economical and sure. Anya handed him the charges, her face pale in the dying light, her eyes wide with a terrible understanding. Set the primary charge on the windward riser, he said. His voice was flat, technical. We need a critical mass of vapor for a fuel air explosion. The secondary goes on the main support here. It'll drop the whole tank. His orders were calm. They were horrific. He gave the final command, his hand holding the detonator. He looked at Anya, a silent question. She met his gaze and gave a single, sharp nod. He triggered it. For a heartbeat, there was only the click. Then the world went silent. A bloom of orange light blossomed at the base of the distant chemical plant, a beautiful, awful flower unfolding in the dark. A shockwave followed, not a sound, but a physical presence, a ripple that distorted the air itself. The fire spread, leaping from tank to tank, finding fuel lines, igniting entire city blocks. A roaring vortex began to form, a whirlwind of flame that pulled the air, debris, and the dead into its incandescent heart. They scrambled down the ladder and ran along their pre-planned route, the heat blistering at their backs. The roar was absolute now, a physical force that vibrated through the soles of their shoes and drowned out thought itself. He stood on the outer wall of the stadium, looking back at his creation. The city was a sea of fire under the night sky. The endless, shuffling horde was gone, consumed, drawn into the pyre. The concrete promenade was cool and solid beneath his feet. Anya came to his side. She said nothing. She simply took his hand. Her touch was not one of condemnation or even comfort. It was a touch of shared burden, a quiet acknowledgement of the weight they now both carried. The flames were reflected in his eyes, two miniature infernos. The haunted rescuer was gone, burned away. In his place stood the grim architect of their salvation. He saved his new family by becoming the apocalypse, and the weight of that choice was a scar far deeper than any burn. He didn't just clear a path, he realized, the awful truth settling in his soul. He built a pyre, and the whole world was going to come see what was burning.